What's up, speedtards? Welcome to the second installment of the Bonnot Gang series. We'll be reading chapter 2 tonight of Richard Perry's The Bonnot Gang, the story of the French illegalists. Chapter 2, A New Beginning. I got a full panel tonight. We got Alcaz is back. We got Lane, Melon Tip, CSD, and Many Dog. What's up, guys? How's it going?
Pretty good.
Hello.
It's going good, man.
Yeah, that's all right.
It's going good.
That's good. That's good. We're all doing good. We're all happy, you know. So let's get started with the reading, I guess. Give me a sec. I just got to do the share screen thing. Chrome tab. Sorry, guys. Should have had this lined up before we started. All right, there we go. Chapter 2, of The Bonnot Gang by Richard Perry, A New Beginning. Starts with a Max Stirner quote. "Do with it what you will and can. That is your affair and does not trouble me. You will perhaps have only trouble, combat, and death from it. Very few will draw joy from it." Max Stirner, 1806 to 1856, in his book, The Ego and Its Own. Libertad. Around the turn of the century, anarchist individualist propaganda was centered on Sébastien Fauré's weekly journal Le Libertaire, still in existence today as the organ of the Fédération Anarchiste. This gave space to individualist ideas and was critical of syndicalism. One anarchist who worked for the paper was Albert Joseph, habitually known as Libertad, who founded the milieu within which illegalism was to flourish. Libertad was brought up in an orphan school, the abandoned son of a local prefect and an unknown woman, and went to secondary school in Bordeaux. A job was found for him, but he was soon dismissed and sent back to the children's home from which he absconded and took to the road as a trémouilleur or tramp. This probably brought him his first contact with anarchists, as tramps often lodged at anarchist-run labor exchanges. The Bourse de Travail, where they might be given popular revolutionary song sheets to sell on their travels at 2 centimes apiece. Some tramps would have been unemployed workers on the Vatican, that is, given journey money and supplied with coupons for free meals and lodging in the home that they would find work. Many of them would have been workers sacked for syndicalist or revolutionary opinions. Some tramps lived parasitically off of the Bourse de Travail, while others were more devoted to spreading anarchist propaganda on their travels around France and neighboring countries such as Switzerland and Belgium. Many had decided to refuse regular waged work, or it had refused them, and lived hand to mouth doing part-time work, selling cheap trinkets at local markets and doing the odd bit of thieving. Libertad made his way north from Bordeaux and arrived in Paris in 1897 at the age of 22. Marked down for his anarchist opinions, he had already been under surveillance for 3 years. Over the next 10, his police record was to accumulate paper to a thickness of 3 inches. In the capital, he stayed on the premises of Le Libertaire and worked on the paper for several years alongside Charles Mulatto and occasionally the syndicalists Pelotier and de la Salle. He also collaborated on the pro-Dreyfusard daily Le Journal de People, launched by Sébastien Fauré and Émile Pouget. He was not yet of the individualist persuasion, although it was probably here that he encountered individualist ideas. In 1900, Libertad found work with a regular publishing company as a proofreader, still a favorite job among Parisian anarchists due to the high pay and flexible hours, and stayed there until 1905, joining the Union. In the same year, after speaking at a public meeting in Nanterre, just outside Paris, he met Paraf Javal, and in October of 1902, they set up the Causerie Populaire at 22 Rue de Chevalier de la Barre in Montmartre, just behind the Sacré-Cœur. The location was somewhat appropriate, as this street was the old Rue de Roussier, where 2 generals had been shot by communards in 1871. The Sacre-Cœur itself had been built quite deliberately on the site of the old artillery park where the insurrection had begun. MacMahon, the marshal in charge of the repression, had specifically ordered its construction in expiation for the crimes of the Commune. The basilica was still incomplete, however, when the Causier de Populaire was founded. The church was meant to stand evermore as a psychological and material expression of the victory of the bourgeoisie. Dominating Paris atop the working-class neighborhood of Montmartre, it was seen even by the esteemed novelist Émile Zola as a declaration of war and as a citadel of the absurd. As a Christian church, it proclaimed the continued reign of suffering, both ideologically and in reality, and demanded resignation to that suffering. Libertad had already had dealings with the place. Hungry, he had gone to receive Christian charity in the form of food doled out to the poor each evening, but first had to listen to the sermon. After suffering in silence for several minutes, he could finally bear it no longer and sprang to his feet to denounce the priest's hypocrisy. A tumultuous scene ensued, and Libertad was carted away and sentenced to 2 months' prison for insulting public morals. Rapidly, he accumulated further convictions for vagrancy, insulting behavior, and shouting "down with the army." The latter deemed more serious than disturbing, the pax die, as he received 3 months in prison. Now in his late 20s, bearded but already balding, Libertad began a dynamic proselytization in Montmartre that was an extraordinary, powerful affirmation of anarchist individualism. Crippled in one leg, he carried 2 walking sticks, which he wielded very skillfully in fights, and habitually wore sandals and a large loose-fitting typographer's black shirt. One comrade said of him that he was a one-man demonstration, a Latin riot. He was quickly a popular figure throughout Paris. His style of propaganda was summed up by Victor Serge as follows: "Don't wait for the revolution. Those who promise revolution are frauds, just like the others. Make your own revolution by being free men and living in comradeship." His absolute commandment and rule of life was, let the old world go to blazes. He had children to whom he refused to give state registration. The state? Don't know it. The name? I don't give a damn. They'll pick one that suits them. The law? To the devil with it. He sung the praises of anarchy as a liberating force, which people could find inside themselves. Every Monday evening, a causerie or discussion took place in the best room of the Rue de Chevalet de la Barre. It was a gloomy ground-floor room decorated in the modern style, with flower-patterned wallpaper. Comrades would sit on the old decrepit benches of chairs, pilfered from the local squares and bistros. The speaker, if there was one, would lean against an old rickety table, while others would be flicking through the books and pamphlets piled up on the counter at the back of the room. By 1904, the causerie were proving successful enough in the working-class quarters of the... Sorry, I'm bad with Roman numerals, guys. I think that's 28th, 29th, and 30th arrondissements in Courbevoie and the Quartier Latin, to enable a bookshop to be opened in the Rue de Merle and an annex in the Rue d'Angoulême in the 30th arrondissement. Libertad, erstwhile cooperation with the syndicalist militants, was now coming to an end. In 1903, he and Perroff Javal had formed the Anti-Militarist League in association with some leading syndicalists. But this alliance fell apart during the Amsterdam Congress of the International Anti-Militarist Association in June 1904. Libertad and Perroff Javal saw desertion or draft dodging as the best anti-militarist strategy, believing that if anarchists stayed in the army awaiting a revolutionary situation, they would very quickly all end up in military prisons or the African disciplinary battalions. The Congress, however, saw such a strategy as too individualistic, preferring soldiers to remain disaffected within their units so as to make the army as a whole less reliable. Despite the mutiny of the 17th Line Regiment in 1907, when the government rather stupidly sent local troops in to suppress the revolt by vineyard workers, who were no more than their own kith and kin, the individualist strategy was probably more realistic, especially given the figures for the number of men rotting in the African hard labor prisons. As a result, Libertad and Paraf Javal left the Anti-Militarist League and stepped up anti-syndicalist propaganda. A whole series of articles appeared that year in Le Libertaire against participation in elections, unions, and cooperatives. All participation in power structures, even alternative ones, was seen to reinforce the hierarchical system of power as a whole. Paraf Javal put forward the individualist argument in an article entitled, "What is a Union?" and answered his question as follows. It is a grouping whereby the downtrodden masses class themselves by trade in order to try to make the relations between the bosses and workers less intolerable. From the two propositions, one conclusion: where they don't succeed, then the union's task is useless. And where they do, then the union's work is harmful, because a group of men will have made their situation less intolerable and will consequently have made present society more durable. Further pamphlets rolled off the presses. What I mean by anarchic individualism, anarchist individualism in practice. Pamphlets on Max Stirner and Hans Reiner's Little Individualist Handbook. Libertad, however, was less a writer than an orator, preferring to intervene verbally. In January 1905, the veteran communard Louise Michel died in Marseille, and the AIA called a meeting in Paris to organize a spectacular revolutionary funeral. Libertad went along, but his attitude clashed with that of the militants. He told them that the whole ceremony was ridiculous, just as ridiculous as calling a woman well into her 70s the Red Virgin. She lost her virginity long ago, he proclaimed. The crowd became hostile, and he withdrew muttering, "You're all idiots." The funeral went ahead as planned, with tens of thousands lining the route and in the procession. The city was swamped with police and regular army units, and many bourgeois apparently fled, fearing that revolution was imminent. Some Catholics even locked themselves in their churches, ready to defend themselves against the crowd. Despite police provocations, including the banning of songs and unauthorized flags, there were very few incidents. By contrast, in Russia, the same day was to go down in history as Bloody Sunday, the start of the 1905 revolution. The Cause Populaire now had a regular audience, but it was still in minimal size, and the only hope of reaching a wider public lay in publishing a regular paper that could continue and print the discussions of the ideas of Stirner, Nietzsche, Bakunin, George Sorel, the theorist of revolutionary syndicalism, and others, as well as arguing for a new revolutionary practice based on the self-realization of the individual. Libertad and his two lovers, the school-teacher sisters Anna and Amandine Mahe and Paraf Javal, now put their combined energies into founding an anarchist individualist weekly, so they wouldn't have to rely on Le Libertaire to voice their opinions. The first issue of L'Anarchie appeared on 13th April 1905 and continued to appear every Thursday without interruption until it was suppressed with all the other revolutionary papers at the outbreak of war in 1914. Its title harked back to the first paper ever to adopt the anarchist label, Ansem Bella Garrigues' L'Anarchie Journal d'Ordre, of which only 2 issues were produced in 1850. His slogan had been, "I deny everything, I affirm only myself." Libertad ended his first article with the battle cry, "Resignation is death, revolt is life." There was a print run of 4,000, although perhaps only half that number were sold, at 10 centimes a copy, like the other anarchist papers. Readership figures are unknown. Financially, it was maintained by voluntary donations to supplement the small income from street and bookshop sales. It probably also benefited from the occasional reprise individuelle, thefts carried out by comrades. The main contributors besides Libertad, Paraf Javal, and the Mahe sisters were René Hem, aka Mauritius or Van Damme, André Roulet, aka Lorelot, June Lucien Ernest, aka Armand, and Jean Morand, one of another pair of sisters with whom Libertad had intimate relations. Anna Mahe was the nominal manageress of the paper. Lenarchy declared itself against resignation and conformity to the existing state of affairs, and particularly opposed vices, habits, and prejudices such as work, marriage, military service, voting, smoking tobacco, drinking alcohol, and the eating of meat. It exalted l'entour, the outsider, and the hors la loi, outlaws. According to Lorelei, its purpose was to work sincerely for individual regeneration and the revolution of the self. Lanarchy's view of society was essentially as follows. Firstly, there were two opposed classes, bourgeois and proletarian, but only individuals, although there were those who were for and those who were against society as it was presently constituted. The master and the slave were equally part of the system and mutually dependent, but the rebel or revolt could come originally from either category. Their propaganda was addressed to anybody prepared to rise in revolt against existing society. The syndicates or unions were seen simply as capitalist organizations, which defended workers as workers, thus keeping them in a social role, which it should have been the anarchist aim to destroy. To invest them with the value only so long as they were workers had nothing to do with their own realization as individuals. The syndicalists were seen as unwitting fools of capitalism, whose practical reformism was only kept going by the myth of the revolution, an ideology which furnished the unions with militants for their present-day battles. Only Georges Sorel had been shrewd enough to accept that the idea of the revolution was indeed a myth. But not only was such a myth necessary, it was in fact the whole essence of socialism, without which the struggle for the working class might collapse into despair. For Sorel, the present-day struggle was everything, and in this he had something in common with the politics of Lanarchy, though he was a believer in the mass rather than the individual. Sorel's realism was seen by the anarchist individualists as further evidence of the bankruptcy of syndicalism. Especially nauseating to them was the dry academic moralizing of Jean Grave, the anarchist pope. In Temple Nouveau, while the May Day celebrations were regarded contemptuously as nothing more than theatrical role-playing, mirroring the absurdity of the bourgeois' 14th of July, Bastille Day, it changed nothing. The individualist's ideal was to live their lives as neither exploiter nor exploited. But how to do that in a society divided in this way? Their answer was for people to take direct action against the reprise individuelle, or in slang, le reprise otage, taking back the whole heap. A good part of 1906 was spent campaigning against the elections. Previously, Libertad had stood as the abstentionist candidate of the 30th arrondissement, but this time they relied on interventions, posters, and the paper. At one large socialist gathering in Nanterre, the socialist deputy MP was almost thrown out of the window. Many of the interventions by the anarchists ended up in fighting. However, trouble was also brewing internally. Libertad and Paraf Javal had argued, and the latter had taken control of the bookshop in Rue du Morel, setting up a scientific studies group which announced itself for a reasoned social organization obtained by scientific camaraderie, methodically and logically obtained outside all coercion. What this actually meant was not quite clear, except that Paraf Javal was obsessed with science and logic, synonymous as they were in those times with the idea of progress. In February 1907, a police report noted that the two groups had fallen out and foresaw trouble in the future. The police were not to be disappointed. For the time being, however, there was only trouble with the authorities. On May Day, Libertad, Jean Morand, and another comrade called Millet were arrested for evading fares on the metro and assaulting a ticket collector and a policeman. Millet was also charged with carrying a knuckle duster. Libertad spent a month in prison, but within 2 weeks of his release, there was more serious trouble when it was decided to hold a Sunday evening causerie en plein air. It was a warm summer night, and soon it reported 200 people had gathered in the Rue de la Barre on the heights of Montmartre. Some local traders complained about the noise and obstruction, and the police ordered the crowd to disperse. The anarchists refused, and when police reinforcements were called, a pitched battle ensued, leaving several wounded. The street was left littered with broken chairs, bottles, and the usual strange debris of a crowd suddenly dispersed. After that affair, things seem to have remained comparatively quiet for the next year, until the summer season of interventions got underway. Syndicalist meetings were often the target this time, and the anarchist individualists were definitely persona non grata. On one occasion, Libertad asked for the right to speak, but was refused and told that his group was not welcome. Fights broke out with the stewards and lasted for half an hour, until finally Libertad's group stormed onto the platform and sent the syndicalists fleeing. The meeting broke up in disorder without Libertad being heard. The conflict between Paraf Javal's group of scientists and the Causerie Populaire comrades now came to a head. Paraf Javal was already angry that his pamphlets were being sold at causeries and were not being paid for, when one of Libertad's group, Henry Martin, alias Japonet, Amadine Mahe's new lovers, stole some money from the bookstall at a meeting of the Scientific Studies group. At a subsequent meeting, a brawl ensued between partisans of the two groups in which knives, knuckle dusters, and spiked wristbands were used. After this incident, Paraf Javal would only go out armed with a revolver and a dagger, but he preferred to stay at home writing a diatribe against Libertad's group. The pamphlet Evolution of a Group Under a Bad Influence was greeted with anger and derision by anarchists everywhere, and effectively isolated his small clique. At the Rue de la Barre, however, Libertad was also on his own, having fallen out with both the Mahe sisters, Jean Morand and Henry Martin. The de Blasius brothers, who ran the print shop, had also had enough of the Rue de la Barre, and at the instigation of Paraf Javal, they departed with some of the printing material and most of the pamphlets. Just over 2 weeks later, on 29 September 1908, a detective of the 3rd Brigade included in his report the following. A few days ago, there was a fight between a well-known comrade, Bernard, and Libertad inside the Causerie Populaire in the Rue de la Barre. Libertad gave Bernard a serious blow to the head, and covered in blood, the latter ran out towards Rue Ramy. During the fight, one of the Mahe sisters kicked Libertad in the stomach to try and put a stop to it. A week later, he was taken seriously ill to the nearby hospital of l'Arboissat. Sorry, like my French pronunciations are not good. And eventually died in the early hours of the morning on 12th November. There were rumors that he had died at the hands of the police on the steps of Montmartre, or that his death was due to natural causes. But it seems, and this is substantiated by a later editor of L'Anarchie, that the true cause was the kick in the stomach by his one-time lover. He had fallen out with his erstwhile comrades to such an extent that they refused to view the body or claim it for burial. After the statutory 72 hours, it was taken to the École de la Clamart Medical School to be used in the furtherance of scientific research. All right, we're going to take a break there. What did you guys think about Albert Libertad and what we've read so far?
Not gonna lie, I love how like almost every French radical, regardless of how they viewed syndicalism, loved George Sorel.
Yeah. Well, they also sort of had the similar critique against like syndicalism as Forgot the Left Panakoek, if you read his writings on unions and stuff.
Also,
But there's one difference there. Panakoek still believes in like the class struggle. These people also rejected the class struggle.
Yeah, they talk about how like the left is trying to like improve the status of workers, but like being a worker is still like
Yeah, so they just being in a position of being like exploited. Like Just
Anarchists
sort of
wanted
be
to
your own
destroy.
man, separate yourself from
Yeah,
society. Like, I don't know,
exactly.
G.G. Allen.
Based G.G. Allen.
Yeah,
Based in
that's
G.G. Allen
exactly
form.
what the one guy was doing, though. Just separate yourself and ignore all laws.
Yeah. What were you saying about Bordiga, Many Dog?
Oh no, Bordiga also has an essay on like the union or the factory or power, in
Hmm.
which he basically tells why cynicalism is bad praxis and we should instead take over the communists should instead take over the state.
Yeah, Panakoic says the same thing.
If I'm not mistaken, Gramsci also had similar critiques.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I found
Also,
this.
another part. Oh, you can go ahead.
I posted this meme on the main channel of Futurism Forever earlier today. I'll just read it quick because it covers a lot of the same ground. Political parties and unions are capitalist organizations which defended the workers as workers, thus keeping them in a role anarchists should aim to destroy. Our roles as workers have little to do with our own realization as individuals. Our ideal is to live our lives as neither exploited nor exploiter. But how to do that under the existing society? Through the reprise individuelle, the individual taking what she desires from her exploiters. Kind of covers a lot of the same ground that comes up in the Albert Libertad section of this
Yeah.
chapter.
You know, that's like kind of what separates the legalists is that they just reject all organization structures. Like
Yeah,
unlike
that's what
other anarchists who are
separates
like,
Turner
oh, we
too.
just want the union to run everything, or the business, or the commune, or whatever. They just reject all of it.
Yeah.
Stoner was the same way. It doesn't really advocate a system. Just break yourself from all structures, and everyone should do that.
And do whatever the fuck you want, basically.
Yeah.
I think
Okay.
Sterner would be proud of Libertad.
I think he would be proud of G.G. Allen.
Yeah.
I don't know who he is, sorry.
Futurism Forever endorses G.G. Allen. G.G. Allen was based as fuck.
Yes.
For those who aren't aware, he was like a punk rock singer and
Too
figure.
punk for punk, really.
Yeah.
He rejected the term punk. He always called it rock and roll.
Yeah, he would like assault members in the audience. He often sexually assaulted women or men, or like pretty much.
He almost hospitalized one woman
Yeah,
that he had a relationship with. That was his longest prison.
That's
No,
so
he did
fucked.
hospitalize her, but that was his longest prison sentence. He almost killed her.
Jesus Christ, this is
Bruh.
fucked.
yeah.
Yeah,
He has
another
a-
part of this writing that I have
Go ahead.
to say that is kind of admirable is how like it said like that the communards killed two generals in the streets. Like that's just not something you'd see like today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It kind of shows how like weak-minded and weak-willed the modern like day left or quote-unquote revolutionaries are.
Mm-hmm.
I don't
All men were different back then, really.
Yeah, those French
What a-
radicals back then were wild, bro.
I don't think we have an equivalent for the illegalists in today's milieu, whether either on the left or the right. Like
Just a little fun fact: there's a lot of small illegalist terrorist groups in Latin America that commit like small bombings and all that. After we did our first episode, I looked into it and I'm like, holy shit! There's like well over a dozen of these all over Latin America.
I mean,
You-
just
That actually doesn't surprise me, though.
yeah.
It's in Latin America. That sounds like where it would be.
Yeah,
It's way
true.
less central authority. It's a lot more anarchistic.
Yeah, it's why part of why the Zapatistas can keep going for so long.
Yeah, same thing with like the FARC and Shining Path, but they're Marxist-Leninist.
But yeah, most like anarchist states, they don't last long, or they last long because they don't have as much pushback. And like in America, you have Slab City, and that's just land that no one cares about.
Yeah,
That's all
it's
it
really
is.
shitty land. It's fucking Death Valley. It's like the hottest place in the world.
Yeah, And they constantly have a water problem.
Slab City is just fucking people doing meth, and
Yeah.
you know,
And some people who won't let the hippie movement die. But it's most like people doing meth and setting each other on fire.
yeah.
Oh my
Holy
god.
shit.
There's some good art there. It's kind of respectable.
Yeah, there's
in
a
its own way.
documentary about Slab City by Vice.
I gotta check it out.
No, I never liked hippies.
Me neither.
I think I actually do like hippies.
Oh wait, do they
Gio,
burn
you never
black
watched that
people?
documentary, dude? It's good. I'll send it to you.
Yeah, post it in the chat. Yeah, like I don't know, hippies are lame to me. I don't like all that love and peace shit. I think it's corny.
I like
Okay.
the aesthetic.
Perfect,
That's what
okay.
I like.
I think
No,
drugs
I'm
and
more
free
about
love.
the hate and fucking, dude.
Yeah, I think the drugs and free love stuff is cool, but then they get into like anti-war, anti-militarism. Like this is a futurist podcast. I guess it's like it's consistent with what Libertad believed, though. Has anyone here like actually read Albert Libertad?
No.
No,
No, I have
No.
not.
never heard of him.
I did read a couple of his essays earlier this week, and I posted a collection of French individualists in the chat a couple times. I do like his essay, "The Carrion Cult," I think it was called. Talks about how we need to get away from worshiping the dead, and like he talks about how it stalls progress. I think like that essay was like inherently futurist, but none of you guys read it.
So we're just going
Epic
off what
fail.
you said. It sounds futurist.
Yeah, there is definitely some overlap there. I'm gonna give me a second. I'm gonna try and find it and like read a quote from it. Can you guys say something while I'm typing for the sake of our listeners?
Yeah, so since we were talking about Slap City earlier, what did y'all think of Chaz last year?
Chaz?
Oh,
Yeah,
it
I
was
think
such
it
a
was like
disgrace.
the anarchist experiment where everything that could go wrong did go wrong.
Yeah,
And it ended up
basically.
becoming just a black supremacist state.
That's what it
Run
would
by
turn into,
gangs.
man.
Oh,
Any,
they
any
were-
anarchist state would just turn into a black supremacist state in America.
Yeah, that's true.
They're going to be given the most like power in that state because of their oppressed minority status. So all the gangbangers would just take over.
Mhm.
Okay, I found the quote I want to
Must
read. How could we know life when it is only the dead who guide it? How can we live in the present under the tutelage of the past? If man wants to live, let him no longer have any respect for the dead. Let him abandon the cult of carry-on. The dead block the road to progress for the living. We must tear down the pyramids, the tumuli, the tombs. We must bring the wheelbarrows into the cemeteries, so as to rid humanity of what they call respect for the dead, but which is the cult of carry-on. It's an excerpt from his article, The Cult of Carry-On.
Very futuristic.
Very futurist. Tear down the pyramids, the tumuli, the tombs, destroy the past, stop worshiping the dead, like look forward, live in the here and now, embrace the fucking future, embrace progress, stop worshiping the past. I think it's inherently futurist. I'm not sure if he was aware of Marinetti, but
I don't think he was.
It could be possible since they were writing around the same time, and I know
And
Marinetti.
Marinetti started in France, and a lot of his earliest writings were in French.
in Paris, or if Marinetti was aware of Libertad and inspired by him, I think that's possibly more likely. But
Yeah, but you would think he would mention them by now. Like, I know we haven't read everything yet, but you would think he would have mentioned them by now, like from what we've read.
yeah, he was critical of the anarchists because of like the opposition to militarism, like I mentioned earlier, and the anti-war stuff he didn't agree with. But he did like them in other aspects. You can find both criticisms Marinetti criticizing anarchists and praising them.
He likes a certain spirit that anarchism has of rebellion.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
like the most cringe like combination of like the pacifism of hippies and like anarchism would have to be the anarcho-pacifists, so, like Tolstoy was
Oh,
like
there's a
wrote
fucking
about.
gay.
Yeah, dude.
How are you going
Like-
to remove the state by just waiting around?
Well, that's just going. Well,
Just seeking.
No,
the
they believe.
real
I read
difference
I read the
between like
Wikipedia
the
page.
anarchist and the utopians is that the utopians believe that their reality will just come about. Anarchists said no, we have to make it happen. The anarcho-pacifists are going back to the ways of the
Well,
utopians.
they believe in the praxis of like protesting and like mass movements and
Yeah,
like
that's true.
not
But
actually.
so did the utopians to an extent. They wrote to big people saying why it should happen.
what do you guys think of Doomer Gloomer Redneck's comment? I wonder if Nietzsche was an anarchist. I personally,
He wasn't.
he wasn't, but I do think like his concept of like the Ubermensch.
He was an individualist, though.
Yeah, like I agree with Bataille's reading of Nietzsche, like as a free spirit and a rebel and someone who would not be down with like. He's often associated with fascism or like National Socialism, but I think like the Ubermensch would be a free spirit. He would be a rebel. He would not like
I
the
think
militarism.
Like
Yeah.
Junga's anarcho Stern is unique. It is Nietzsche is definitely an individualist.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
Junger's concept of the anarch is definitely far more of Nietzschean anarchism. Because
Ruby.
Junger was called Nietzsche's only true.
Yeah, that
Success.
was Heidegger who said that.
Yeah.
I just find it amazing on how many people that Nietzsche has inspired, from Marxists to liberals to fascists to
Yeah,
varieties and in betweens of these
Christian
ideologies.
theologian.
Oh god, don't even
theist.
get me started on that fucking Nietzsche Catholicism bullshit. That shit's so
That
stupid.
wasn't what I was implying, but
Alright,
Yeah,
well,
there was a few
I was
like
just saying that he inspired pretty much everyone.
true.
Nietzsche and Sorel both inspired pretty much everyone.
Hmm
yeah, but Sorel's a bit more Nietzsche and controversial compared to Nietzsche.
Yeah.
Like I always hear a lot more like times that leftists will defend Nietzsche, but very few of them will defend Sorel. The only one I've seen defend Sorel is Pierre Trudeau.
I've seen a few around.
Like
But
I'm
one I
personally
don't think
like
read
friends.
Sorel because I don't think they understood what Sorel meant by myth.
No, I'm
still
personally
have-
friends with like a Sorelian. He's kind of weird though.
I've never watched any of Pierre Trudeau's videos. He's like friends with Julie, right?
No, they had a debate and they hated each other.
Oh yeah. I
Yeah,
thought
like
they-
Pierre Trudeau, he's like just your like typical like leftist.
He's like an
likes the lines of
orthodox
Sorel.
Marxist.
Yeah, he's an orthodox
Okay.
Marxist. He likes Sorel. Yeah, and he also like debated Julie's
De
calling him, like,
Leon.
Wait, didn't like Sorel said that the Orthodox Marxists are basically adding nothing?
Well, that
Yeah,
was after
yes.
that fucking Reflections on Violence.
Yeah, it was in Reflections of Violence.
It was after
He
That
that
was
he
always
criticized
critical of the-
Marxism. He was
always-
originally in line with Marxist materialism. It wasn't until The Illusion of Progress, which was written the same year as Reflections on Violence, but it wasn't until then that he actually criticized Marxism.
Yeah,
But
people
other
often,
than that, he was in line with it.
yeah. He always-
Outside of like wanting the immediate dissolution of the state.
He always criticized the reformist wing of Marxism, which was really big at the time, led by Bernstein.
Hmm
Oh,
Well,
yeah,
Marxism
that's
took
good.
that route because Engels took it there, along
Yeah.
with a bunch of other Marxists.
Yeah, like Karl Kautsky and Bernstein.
Hmm
Anyway, didn't like Mussolini declared socialism dead when like Bernstein showed up?
I think Sorel did.
That's right. Oh, I
I
know
know-
what Mussolini did in the. I got a German version of Doctrine of Fascism. It stands there.
Yeah, both Sorrell and Mussolini have a weird relationship when it comes to socialism. It's kind of weird, and it requires a lot of context, depending on like the time period.
Okay. Any final thoughts on Albert Libertad before we continue reading?
No, you
No,
can continue.
No.
Okay. I'm getting like a little bit of an echo to whoever that's coming from. Can you try and fix that issue? It's making it hard to listen to, I think. But yeah, I'll continue reading. City of Thieves. I'm gonna like apologize in advance for my friends' pronunciations too. I know they're horrible, but I'm trying my best.
Buongiorno.
All right, City of Thieves. By the end of 1908, Lanarchy was becoming the only anarchist paper which positively promoted crime and the theory of illegalism. This theory differed from the Reprise Individuelle, not just due to its connection with the anarchist individualist current, but because the illegalists stole not simply for the greater advancement of the cause, but for their own advancement, according to Stirner's line of argument, or at least so they said. In practice, successful illegalism probably helped support the weekly paper and comrades who were in dire financial need. Yet there was not necessarily a contradiction here, for as part of the movement, their own self-realization was reflected in the self-realization of other comrades. An egoistic gesture in revolutionary terms should also be an altruistic one. L'Oreillot had already encouraged illegality because it involved minimal risks and satisfactory returns, while Armand suggested that it was unimportant whether a comrade earned his living legally or illegally, but important that he lived to his own profit and advantage. Illegalism was viewed favorably by many individualists in the causerie populaire milieu, not least because they engaged in petty crime or benefited from the crimes of others, like much of the populace of working class Montmartre. As Victor Serge later recalled, one of the peculiar features of working class Paris at this time was that it bordered extensively on the underworld. That is, on the vast world of fly-by-nights, outcasts, paupers, and criminals. There were few essential differences between the young worker or artisan from the old central districts and the ponce from the alleys around Les Halles. A chauffeur or mechanic with any wits about him would pilfer all he could from the boss as a matter of course, out of class consciousness. In fact, there were neighborhoods in Paris more or less recognized as criminal, with their own traditions and way of life, principally the northern outskirts of the city, Pantin, Saint-Ouen, Aubervilliers, and Clichy. A large number of Parisian criminals made their living from the thousands of tourists who, in the wake of the Great Exhibition of 1900, flocked to see the glittering capital of European civilization. There were plenty of professional beggars and pickpockets, as well as thousands of part-time prostitutes on the boulevards and the Brassiere, working-class women forced to serve as gentlemen in order to make ends meet. There were also professional loan sharks, confidence tricksters, forgers, counterfeiters, and even some specializing in dog or bicycle theft. Parisian workers, if not of this underworld, were usually sympathetic to it and naturally hostile to the police, and not averse to a bit of thieving themselves. The public in general had an almost ambivalent attitude to crime. The anarchist viewpoint that was sympathetic to crime was probably received more favorably by working class people than Jean Graves' moral sermonizing that all crime was essentially bourgeois. One of the most popular working class heroes of the time was the anarchist Ravachol, who had declared that to die of hunger is cowardly and degrading. I preferred to turn thief, counterfeiter, murderer. If working class people were sympathetic to such a figure, It was because they understood where he was coming from. The hostility of employers to workers who expressed unsound opinions or who were denounced to them by the police as anarchists or troublemakers meant that many hundreds of workers found it extremely difficult to find work and were virtually forced into criminality. Under capitalism, where a worker's only power is his or her labor power, which must be sold in order to survive, what can someone do when the employers refuse to buy, consequently denying the right to live? The illegalists answered this question through a reversal of perspective. Through the physical power that is all a worker possesses, the means of survival have to be seized directly, without exchange, and if necessary, by force. The crossover in Paris between the working class, the underworld, and revolutionary politics was a similar sort of phenomenon to the situation in Tsarist Russia, but there, politics was much more firmly rooted in illegality. Paris, long a haven for Russian refugees, sheltered upwards of 25,000 exiles, of whom the police estimated that no less than 1,500 were terrorists, and 550 of them anarchists or maximalists. The French intelligence services tried to keep a close watch on the latter category, especially in their plans for expropriations, and also because they had links with French revolutionaries and Indian nationalists, whom they aided in the study and manufacture of pyrotechnics. The social revolutionary maximalists were well known for their advocacy of a wider application of terrorism, including the incendiarism and pillage of estates, as well as individual assassinations. They also carried out expropriations at home and abroad. One discussed in Rue Saint-Jacques by Divino-Gorsky, and a comrade was planned for a branch of the Crédit Lyonnais in Paris, but was rejected in favor of an attack on a bank in Montreux in Switzerland. In this bungled operation in 1907, 4 people were killed and both revolutionaries arrested. A more spectacular action took place in the same year, carried out by members of the Bolshevik faction of the Russian Social Democratic Labor Party. Led by Semyonovich Petroshin, I botched that one. An attack on the state bank in Tbilisi, Georgia, netted 340,000 kopecks, but it was mainly in large denomination bills, and revolutionaries were caught in Paris trying to exchange them. Also around this time, members of the Polish Socialist Party, led by Pilsudski, were conducting raids on tax offices, ambushing treasury vans, and assassinating governors and policemen. The experience, often violent and clandestine, of the Russian revolutionaries was communicated by refugees to those Western revolutionaries who were most sympathetic to both ideas and actions, the anarchists above all. But if the Bolsheviks, for instance, engaged in expropriations, this was far from illegalism. Such expropriations were done for the cause, in this case, the party, and the comrades responsible only received 50 kopecks a day to live on. Bolshevik illegality was simply a necessary tactic at the time for building the party. Nevertheless, the effect of armed expropriations, assassinations, the head of the Russian Secret Service, the Okhrana, was executed in a Paris hotel room in 1908, and bomb explosions, usually accidental, as in the Bois de Vincennes in 1906 and the Bois de Boulogne in 1908, provided anarchists with inspiration and something to admire and sympathize with. Above all, the Russian Revolution of 1905 sent revolutionaries into a state of great excitement, and the syndicalist leaders, in particular, determined to face up their responsibilities as the vanguard of the working class. All right, that concludes that portion of the chapter. Anyone have any thoughts?
Why would you steal a fucking dog?
Why would you steal a dog?
Yeah, why?
Because they wanted to. Like it said that they stole for their own individual ego and not for the cause.
Oh, just because I want to steal a dog today. Oh, that is one.
Give me that dog.
Yeah.
What you gonna do?
Around the end, when it started talking about the Bolsheviks and how they carried out illegal activities, but it was far from illegalism, it was kind of like what I was saying last episode on this about like FARC and Shining Path that does like which they do like drug trafficking and extortion. They're not doing it because they're influenced by illegalism. They're doing it out of necessity to like keep their operations
To
going.
fund their own operation, yeah.
Okay, then what about the IRA? Aren't they like importing weapons to Ireland?
As far as I'm aware, like they may be importing weapons, but I know like they're very anti-drug. A while ago, one of the groups that merged with them were like in this town, and when they found a drug dealer, they would just shoot him in the legs, and sometimes they would even kill him.
Based.
Last Friday, I was talking to Seamus, and we were talking about Irish drill music and 86 Inc. in particular. And he said, like, those guys are posers. Like, the IRA controls the fucking criminal
Guns.
underworld of Ireland. These dudes are just like, yeah, they're posers. You know, anyone have? I don't know why I brought that up. Anyone have any thoughts on that though? Or
I mean, that's the first I've heard of it because everything else tells me they're anti-drugs. But that wouldn't boggle my mind if a certain faction did that because it's not uncommon for these Marxist guerrilla groups, especially since they don't get funding anymore, to just go into drug trafficking or start operating in the criminal underworld. But but this is the first time I'm hearing of it with the IRA.
yeah,
Also, in Ireland, there's also just a mafia for the drugs, the regular Irish mafia. Basically, these two, the IRA and the mafia, are controlling the criminal underworld of Ireland, and no one else.
okay. Correct me if I'm wrong, but like Stalin in his early days was like a bank robber and
Yeah,
shit.
he was.
Yeah.
Yes.
He was a thug. He was a kidnapper. He was a bank robber.
Well, Stalin
Wait,
organized the bank robbery, but I don't think he himself ever actually like got a gun and stole money. All he knows is
Didn't
he
Stalin
organized
fuck a
them.
child once?
It wouldn't
Stalin?
surprise me the bank robbery they were talking about, like Stalin was there or something like that. That wouldn't surprise me.
Stalin, like the thing with the kid is that I don't know. He was like, you know, it was the fucking 1800s, dude. Like fucking like back then, dude. Child marriages were common. I wouldn't be surprised if Stalin like did do
If
some
he-
shit with that 14-year-old.
Yeah, she was 13, I think. Like in some fucking random village in Siberia.
Yeah, dude.
Where it
There's
was
like
young
Slavic
Stalin,
Russians, dude.
Oh,
He was a train robber too,
wow.
based. Who would win in a fist fight, Nestor, Makhno, or Leon Trotsky?
Mackinac.
Mackinac was like
Mackinac
fucking
was 1'6".
4'11", dude. I don't know.
Like he,
I don't know. I feel like Macno would get him a shutting chop off Trotsky's head.
It's a fist fight, though, dude.
I
Oh.
feel
It's not
little
a fist
guys
fight,
that
it's
have more fight in them because they have more to prove. Like, don't fuck with the little people, Outcast.
How tall was Mackinac? Let me look this up.
I don't
Macno's
know.
name,
actually.
like,
1
doesn't give a
meter and
fuck about the
60
rules.
centimeters.
Oh,
His
he's
know,
dre-
like-
he was 5'3".
Based.
he had a
Yeah,
strategy where
Yeah, he would win.
he dressed up as a woman so enemies
Yeah,
couldn't
the
attack.
thing is that Trotsky, he was fucking like stone cold, dude. Like during the Russian Civil War, like he would like automatically like execute like entire villages just to like prove out.
Yeah, Trotsky was
to send
a
points.
fucking bloody motherfucker. Like,
They called him a godless butcher.
yeah.
Think he's a Jew, what do you expect?
No. No anti-Semitism on the podcast.
Okay.
Yeah, we do not endorse anti-Semitism.
I know, it was a joke.
I'm gonna take a quick washroom break, guys. Talk amongst yourselves. I'll be back real quick.
Also, the article also mentioned that some of the Russian immigrants were maximalists, and these guys were basically people who split with the social revolutionaries, who were basically an agrarian socialist and a revolutionary socialist party in Russia. Just for those who don't know, they also had a lot of line with like libertarianism and anarchism too, and they took inspiration from Mikhail Bakunin. I just thought I would throw that out there.
Dude, I didn't even know Bakun was like bisexual.
Oh yeah, he was.
He was
Yes.
bisexual?
What?
Yes.
Yeah, like during
That-
like the
yeah,
fucking
the
First
Marx
International.
used that to kick fascists out of the Communist International.
Yeah, he like literally told the communists that Bakun was bisexual and they kicked him out.
Oh.
Yeah, there was an actual relationship he had. Oh fuck, the guys forget me name. The first thing a revolutionary must learn here, he's a doomed man. What's his fucking name?
Wait, you're telling me Magna was fucking small, dressed up as a woman, and he was bisexual?
Bakunin.
No, Bakunin.
Yeah, Bakunin.
Ma-
not
Bakunin didn't
Magna.
dress up as a
Fuck.
woman. Bakunin was actually a top.
Oh, okay.
Melons, you retard.
Yeah, I'm retarded. Cry about it.
Cry more, Alcaz. So what did I miss? You guys are still talking about.
No, we were just talking about Bakunin's sexuality.
And the maximalist.
What are maximalists? Like I've heard the
they're
term before,
basically-
but
They basically split from a Russian party called the Social Revolutionaries, who were basically quasi-libertarian, agrarian socialist. They took influence from Bakunin and were quasi nationalistic.
okay. You learn something new every day. I've heard the term before, but I've never read into them at all.
Yeah, the Union of Socialist Revolutionary Maximalists.
I'm underbred on communism in general.
Dude, there's way too much to read into it, dude. Like when you get
It's
into
stupid, honestly. Yeah.
Dude, I saw this fucking graph of Marxist underground Marxist literature you need to read, and it was literally 200 different books and different ideas from different professors.
I mean,
like,
all they
there's,
did was write for fucking, tens of, 200 plus years. All they did was
Yeah.
fucking write books.
Yeah,
A lot of shit.
They're too
Yeah,
mainstream.
you can just browse the Marxist Internet Archive. There's well over 100 authors, and I guarantee you they don't even have all of them on there.
that's what happens when you're on an armchair, though. You just constantly write theory and just do nothing all day except that.
Mhm.
Yeah, communism is too mainstream. That's the problem.
CC.
I don't think the maximalists were Marxists though, because agrarian socialism is contradictory to historical materialism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, historical materialism's about advancement, progress, industrializing, throwing away elements of the past, bringing in the new.
All right, final thoughts on that section before we read State of Emergency.
No.
Carry on.
Okay, again, I apologize for my pronunciations and trying. State of Emergency. By 1906, the Republican bloc had successfully beaten off the challenge to its power of the extreme right wing, a struggle which had lasted for 10 years and which had been crystallized in the Dreyfus Affair. Essentially, it was a showdown between the more progressive capitalists who sought to usher France into the era of mass production and the backward pro-monarchical forces of the Catholic Church and army, who still harked after the feudal traditionalism of the ancient regime. It was a struggle that French capitalism as a whole could not afford to lose, and needless to say, clerical militarism was routed. The state took control of mass education, and the radicals were at last left free to deal with the working class. The CGT had largely stayed out of this fight between what they had correctly analyzed as rival factions of the bourgeoisie, although many anarchists were prepared to give grudging support to the Dreyfusards. In 1906, the CGT emphasized their independence in the Charter of Amiens, which denounced their autonomy from the parties of both right and left, and called for a general strike on the 1st of May in demand of an 8-hour working day. This was the first ever general strike in France, but only 200,000 workers responded. a fraction of the industrial workforce, of whom only 7% were CGT members. Nevertheless, the radical Prime Minister Clemenescu, an ex-syndicalist, declared a state of emergency, arrested the CGT leaders, Puget, Griffuel, and Yvetot, proceeded to turn Paris into an armed camp. 60,000 troops were mobilized to patrol the streets. Faced with blatant repression by the government and a lack of mass support, the strikers returned to work. But over 1 million days were lost that year, the highest ever. It was the crest of the revolutionary syndicalist wave, although the CGT continued to expand, doubling its membership to 600,000 by 1912. The radical bourgeoisie, now dominant in the offices of the state, went on the offensive. Not only was industrial action by civil servants outlawed, a category which included teachers and railway and postal workers, but troops were sent in to break virtually every strike, with the result that dozens of workers were killed and hundreds wounded. A bitter strike by miners in the Nord was crushed in 1906. The protracted struggle of the vineyard workers in the Midi was finally overwhelmed in 1907. Despite the mutiny of a whole regiment of troops sent in to break the strike of the Nantes dockers collapsed the same year. In 1908, striking quarry workers were shot at Dravet and cut down by dragoons at Villeneuve-Saint-Georges. At the same time, electricians plunged Paris into darkness in the hope of winning their dispute, but were forced back to work just like the construction workers. The textile workers were defeated the following year, and an attempted strike by postal workers ended up as a fiasco. With the CGT leadership imprisoned again, aided by this fortunate absence of the anarchist old guard, and pointing to the series of defeats as evidence of bad management, the reformists, led by Leon Jouhua, captured the leadership at the end of the year. Nevertheless, with the numerical strength of the CGT still growing, the employers attempted to vaccinate their workers against the syndicalist virus by recruiting them to company or Catholic-run unions. The yellow or green unions, as they were known, or tried to bargain with more receptive union leaders on a local basis. Meanwhile, the government introduced social legislation in the form of pension laws, which meant that workers had more to lose if they got the sack. As strikes became shorter in duration, involving fewer workers, strikers increasingly used hit squad tactics as a way of outmaneuvering the police and army and directly damaging the employers. But workers' living standards as a whole continued to decline, despite the appearance of abundance given to Paris by the new era of mass production, and more workers were pushed into marginal and criminal activities in order to survive. Only one other legal resource was left to the working class by the bourgeois state: electoral politics. It was no surprise that as the number of working class defeats multiplied, so the socialist vote steadily increased. But one group of proletarians, at least, was not prepared simply to resign itself to this dominant atmosphere of defeatism. Instead, they invested their struggle with an even greater fury. Rather than be exploited, they would refuse waged work. Rather than be forced into poverty, they would steal. Rather than vote, they would riot. Rather than make propaganda in the army, they would refuse to do military service altogether. Rather than complain about their situation, they would take immediate direct action to improve it. These were the sort of attitudes expressed by the new generation of rebels, who had responded to the theory and practice of anarchist individualism. For if Libertad's propaganda had helped create a climate of defiance, it had also reflected a general mood. So that's the end of chapter 2. What did you guys think about that part?
If I'm not mistaken, I think that was those strikes that happened were is what made Sorrell disillusioned with the CGT and ended up inspiring him to write Reflections on Violence.
Yeah, he talked about exactly these threats in the Reflection of Violence.
Yeah, I remember him going over it. Like I just forgot the date. I believe it was in 1907.
Maybe.
Indeed.
Yeah, I haven't read chapter 3, so I'm assuming at the end when it started talking about all the workers going into illegal activities, I'm assuming this is where the legalists are going to have their big breakthrough, and they're going to get like a bunch of people supporting their ideals.
I have not read chapter 3 yet either. I'm reading one chapter at a time, so I do read the chapters in advance, so I know what we're going to be talking about. But yeah, I'm kind of working
I'm
my
the
way
same.
through it with you guys.
Same.
I always have a bunch of books on the go at the same time, so you know,
I'm the
Well-
same way.
I'm always multitasking and reading things in small chunks and fragments. It's probably not the best way to read, to be honest, to process information, but
I do the same thing, so.
I've always kind of read that way though. So
Not gonna lie, I can't wait to cover Sorrel when we do, even though it's a long ways off.
True.
yeah,
And he's base as fuck.
yeah, we
Who
all
doesn't
like
like Papa Sorrel?
He's technically the grandfather of fascism.
The Surrealist Manifesto won the last poll, so we're going to be covering that next month. Next week we're doing Armed Joy by Alfredo Bonanno. So
Hell yeah. That'll be
looking
good. I'm
forward-
excited for that.
Yeah, we're doing that one hella early though, Alcaz. So like
Bruh.
it's early for me, so like you're gonna have to be up bright and early if you're gonna attend that one. We have a panelist from Italy, so we're gonna have like the Italian perspective on
Who?
that one. Eisen. He's from
Nice.
he's from Naples, and yeah, I think it'll be his first podcast in English. So I've never talked to him before, like in voice. So I'm looking forward to it. I've been looking forward to doing Armed Joy for a long time. So yeah, next week should be good. We're going to be doing it earlier than usual, but it's not going to be an evening podcast. It's going to be like 10 a.m. for me. So that'll probably be like 7 in the morning or like 6 in the morning even for you, Alcaz. Either stay up or go to bed early the night before. Yes, insurrectionary anarchism uses organized crime as a form of guerrilla warfare too, right?
Yeah.
I don't
they-
know much about
logical.
insurrectionary anarchism. I'm assuming so.
They don't really care about legality. The ends justify the means. So I don't think they'd be
Well, when
opposed
you're
to it.
insurrectionary, you've kind of left legality out the window.
Yeah,
Maybe they said like cocaine to children. Who knows?
I don't
They
think
probably
No.
would.
They're not the Contras.
Would y'all
they
consider
legalize
illegalism
alcohol.
Would y'all consider illegalism a left-wing ideology?
I guess you could call it that, but
Yeah, it's about
it breaks
removing-
away from typical leftism in that it
Yeah, it's
sort
not
of
part of the
removes
major
itself from
tenets of
class.
leftism. Yeah, it's definitely breaks away from the the traditional left, like when it comes to like class struggle, Marxism, and class struggle anarchism. It's definitely like a more fringier ideology on the left.
It's about it's against hierarchy though, which is
Yeah,
defining
so
it.
yeah, you can. I didn't say you couldn't put it there, but it's very different.
Yeah,
I mean, it's more like I do what I wantism than leftism.
Yeah, but they generally want everyone to do what they want. It's not so much. I want to do what I want and oppress you. They want everyone to do the same, so that way we're all sort of equal in that way.
Or maybe we can call it like post-left.
yeah,
I'm
well,
not
that's
really
the
a
term that they
That's good.
use now.
Yeah,
It's kind of a gay
I'm not a
term,
big fan
though.
of.
Because
I'm not a
even
big fan of-
Zirzand is post-left, so
yeah. Like post-left can mean many things.
me and Lane both come from like a post-left anarchist background.
yeah.
Like post-left anarchists wanted to transcend the like traditional left. It's kind of similar to third positionism in that way, in my opinion. Me and Lazardi were talking about that a couple of weeks
Mhm.
ago in the chat.
But they want to break from the typical left. The left they view as just centered around class, and post-left is typically more centered around an elevation of the individual or individual freedom.
Aren't
Yeah.
there a lot of post-leftists who are environmentalists too?
Yeah. There's a big
Yeah.
like primitivist.
Yeah, like I
Thing.
said, Zizan is post-left.
Yeah, John Zerzan. I was really
Yeah,
into him in my early 20s. I did go through like an anarcho-primi phase in my early
Isn't there like
twenties.
the Eco Liberation Front or whatever, the ELF?
Earth Liberation Front.
Earth Liberation, yeah. Earth
Yeah.
Liberation.
I don't know. You might laugh, but those deep ecologists really love their trees. They'll like do anything for them.
Yeah,
Oh,
like
yes.
in like
That's 'cause-
in like Germany, I saw about a year ago. Like some of these environmental activists literally tied themselves to trees.
Yeah.
Yeah, they used to put like fucking
Linkola
chains.
actually did that, I believe.
Also, speaking of eco-anarchists, like there's also like, if I'm not, yeah, there is an eco.
Oh, the Animal Liberation
Mexico.
Yeah, let's
The
be
Animal
real here.
Liberation Front is actually based.
These
I like
dudes
them.
these dudes had drip. Like,
Yeah. They go
Aw.
like to like animal shelters, not animal shelters, like animal labs, and they save animals and shit.
Okay, that's based.
Yeah,
I like
the Animal
aesthetics.
Liberation Front is based. They're like save animals from being test subjects and animal abuse.
Yeah.
They look like terrorists. It's fucking.
Well, what they're doing
They
is
were.
illegal. They're
Yeah,
stealing animals.
I mean, technically they're
They're stealing
terrorists.
dogs, dude. They're following the illegal.
Who wouldn't like
Fucking
these guys?
path.
Like, come on now. Like,
They're based. The Animal Liberation Front.
There's
yeah.
like,
Solidarity between futurists and that's a nice picture. I'm putting that on the
Yeah.
main channel. Like, yeah, I definitely went through that phase where I was very concerned about the environment. I used to be a primi for about a year in my early 20s, and I was really into Ted Kaczynski at that time. I wasn't always a futurist, guys, but
The Earth Liberation Front did like tons of illegal shit though. They did fucking like they did bombings. And
Everything they do is
Based.
illegal.
Kaczynski built.
I don't know what happened to them. Like, you don't hear about
They all got arrested. There was a something called the Green Scare, where there were a massive crackdown against all the members.
Oh.
Yeah, dude.
I mean, at one point, environmental terrorism was like the biggest like
Yeah,
terror concern
Yeah,
in the United
Green
States.
Scare.
in the 90s.
Yeah.
Free the animals. Support the Animal Liberation Front. And make out with hot anarchist chicks.
not that many of those, but if there are,
Take the green pill, everyone.
like I'll make out with a hot anarchist chick, but she has to fucking take a bath first.
If she shaves her armpits, she can get the fuck out. Like, fuck that shit. Yeah. Anyway, final thoughts, guys, before we wrap up.
It was a great.
Rabbit Liberation
It was
Army.
nice.
Yeah, I think my reading could have been better tonight. I was kind of sloppy. We do these in one take, so it is what it is.
I thought it
You
was
need to-
good.
You need to
just
start
add
doing
some
cocaine.
You did
too.
good.
I try.
Drink some French wine next time.
Maybe that's it. I'm drinking
Yeah.
like Canadian beer tonight instead of vino like I usually do. So maybe that was the problem. The buzz is
Yeah.
hitting differently, but yeah. Rabbit Liberation Army, free the ducks. And yeah, listen to Gorilla Biscuits. I'm just gonna throw
And
that
take
out
the
there.
green pill.
All right, salute, guys. Thanks for listening.
See ya.
Goodbye.